action, party. Cool. Hello. I'm just trying to get like a clean break in my mind from the chaos that's just ensued before we start talking about the films.
Okay.
And that point is now. Hello, and welcome to the CineSkinny podcast. It's our final episode of 2024. We're back in Ground Floor, the EHFM studio on Great Junction Street. It's me, Jamie.
Hello.
Ellie.
Hello.
And Anahit.
Hello.
Very enthusiastic hellos. We're having a great time in here. We've been getting equipment out. We've been plugging things in. Oh, the fun time we've had. Anahit is also like fully obscured by his furniture, so the inscrutability of this podcast only grows by the day. So, final one of 2024. So, two-parter, right? Here's the deal. First part, top 10 of 2024 from off of the Skinny magazine, where we all work in that. We'll go through them in order. It turns out we talked about them all in the podcast, so we're going to try and make that as fun and interesting as we can.
Now, did we influence the top 10, or did we just choose really wisely?
Well, all four of us do work at the magazine, so I think we probably had a bit of a hand in how this thing worked out. But but who could possibly say? And then the second half, which will be out shortly after this one, is more, the fun one, the little, the patter zone. You know, all the funny little jokes and japes that we want to get in at the end of the year. You know, am I going to talk about Netflix's Irish Wish? Yes. I don't want to keep you in suspense.
Was that out last year?
Limited on time.
There's a whole new Lindsay Lohan.
No, Irish Wish was the one from this year. We'll discuss it later in the second part of this episode. You know what that is? Set up, payoff, bang. Right, cool. So we'll crack on with our top 10 of 2024. So Jamie, you ask the writers every year for their top 10.
I do.
And then those top 10s are all amalgamated in some kind of super top 10.
It is.
Cool. Excellent. Right, cool. So that's right. So we all understand the concept. It's a top 10. What's Anahit up to?
Sorry, my water bottle fell.
Anahit's knocking stuff over.
It fell over by itself.
Right, cool. So it's a classic. It's a top 10 of films from 2024. Like, you all know why you're here. Top 10. Number 10 is Love Lies Bleeding, which is Rose Glass's new film that you talked to you talk to Rose Glass about this?
I did speak to Rose Glass. She was lovely.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was great.
This is so defensive.
No, she was. She was really cool. And I'm really happy this has got in the top 10, actually.
Yeah. So Love Lies Bleeding is Katie O'Brien and Kristen Stewart. So Jackie, who Katie O'Brien plays, is a kind of drifting wannabe champion bodybuilder who walks into Lou's gym. Lou is Kristen Stewart, I believe. I've not seen it. And then they embark on this sort of like love story that is also at the same time as described in the magazine, phantasmagoric lesbian crime caper. So we thought for this, right, top 10 of the year, rather than just talk about what the films are, which we do sometimes do, we do a bit of talking about like this is what the film is and also why it's good. We thought we'd talk more about like why these things are in the top 10. What is it about them? Like, why is this in your top 10, Anahit Behrooz?
This is truly news to me.
I mean, what I will say...
It's yes and. Come on, it's
what I will say is, like, listener and co-host, it's a fairly straightforward... Like, what did you think I was going to ask you?
I don't know. But you just made it sound like we've really been, like, planning this as a strategy. And I had no idea. Why is this in the top 10? I think it was my number, like, 14 or something. But I fucking love this film. I think it's so great. I would say it's in the top 10 that people love it so much because it's just so fucking slick as a film in a way that we just don't really see that much anymore. Like, it's so sexy. It has such like a sense of atmosphere and mood. Like, it's so aesthetically like fine-tuned. Everyone has these incredible like 80s shag mullets. Kristen Stewart is so hot. She's so hot. It's insane. There's all of this like almost kind of magical realistic stuff where they're doing like the bits with because it's about like pro like bodybuilders and they do like these steroid injections and it's this almost magical realism and it does really veer in towards that at the end of like these muscles like cracking, growing, this almost body horror. And it just felt so, you were so immersed in this world. It's so violent in a quite like pulpy way, and it just feels like, yeah, like I guess like an 80s pulp film, like a real like callback to a kind of cinema that used to exist, but just done in such a perfectly like, I don't know, original and fine-tuned way. And I just really loved it. Like, it just really got under my skin. I thought it was so great. So sexy, so fun, so silly.
I think you're right as well. Like the fact that it's so completely sexy and stylish that it can get away with doing stuff that is deeply unsexy. Like one of its earliest shots is Kristen Stewart cleaning out the grossest toilet in the world.
Yeah.
At one point, she puts like a full foot in her mouth.
Yes.
Like the audience screams like it was a jump scare, but it's like it gets away with it because it's such a good film.
The thing about all these films is that I think they're all on streaming now as well.
Oh, really?
I think potentially, is that right?
Pretty much.
I think this is on Amazon Prime.
And yeah, Anora is maybe the only one that isn't on streaming just yet. Sorry, spoilers. Anora's on the list. So yeah, you can actually go and like find out more about these films by watching them. So that's always nice. This has been a shambles on my part so far. But that was number 10, Love Lies Bleeding. Number 9, Kneecap, which I personally really enjoyed. Origin story brackets kind of West Belfast rap trio Kneecap, which is a kind of very weird, very kind of lucid. And the thing that I like about it, and the reason that I am very pleased to see it in the top 10, is it shows you can be serious and kind of irreverent and silly at the same time. Like, you don't just have to be like dry and dull and I am making a serious film in capital case, or be like, this is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, do not pass go, do not collect $200. There is room for both, Jamie. There's room in this life that we lead to be serious and political and also stupid.
I think that's probably true of a lot of the films, actually. I think this list, as you'll see as we go down, it's full of like really fun, exciting movies. It's not like kind of dour art house at all, really. It's like every film has kind of real kind of propulsion to it. So and this film like went up like a rocket. Like I remember watching this as like a really fun. This is one where actually I really wish I saw this with an audience. I feel like this would be like the perfect film to watch at midnight with like a really up for it crowd in Belfast. It was so good.
It was really, really good. And yeah, very, like you say, a lot of the films on this list, nice, fun. Like, we're having a good time at the movies. Unfortunately, the next film on the list is All of Us Strangers, which I'm not sure you can fully call a good time. It's a very, very good film.
Yes.
And it is a good time at the movies.
It is.
But it's not a good time at the movies.
I would say, yeah, it's the closest to what you were saying, like this kind of art house film. But even this isn't that. I think there's like a really interesting thread that runs through this entire top 10. This kind of quite like magical realism-y thread through almost every film in it. And this is the same where it's Andrew Haig's kind of queer drama, like romance drama, queer alienation, all of that kind of stuff that he's touched on before. But his stuff tends to be quite, until now, very like realist, very grounded in like the everyday. And this takes this almost like cosmic view of this stuff in a way that at times felt like a little bit Terrence Malick-y. It was really, really beautiful. But yeah, really, really fucking sad. I think I've said before, this is like one of the only films in recent times where I've like cried in the film and then have like come out and continued to cry for like a really long time. It just, it's so brutally sad, like thinks about grief and loss in like such a visceral way. But it's also just one of the most beautiful films of the year. I'm actually shocked that it's only number 8. I wonder if it's because it came out quite early this year and like that kind of recency bias. But it was definitely it was in my top 5. I thought it was gorgeous.
That is another running theme of this top 10, is there was a lot of good films right at the start of the year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to remember some of them. But All of Us Strangers, very memorable. Very, very good. You wouldn't quite call it a needle drop, a very good musical moment that we might talk a bit more about in the second half.
Yes.
Yeah, the use of music, the kind of 80s, like I love it. It's also a good Christmas movie. Like it's a really good film I want to watch over Christmas because it's got that kind of like in-between time where you're kind of like thinking about your past and your parents and like how you used to spend Christmas. Yeah. So that's all really nice.
Yeah.
So that was All of Us Strangers. Next, I mean, the thing is, on this podcast, right, we love to explore all the different parts of le cinema, the kino. We love to take a wild, like, handbrake turn into another handbrake turn in terms of jumping about in the types of films and the air and vibe of films that we talk about. So yes, it's time to talk about Poor Things at number 7 on this list, which is the Yorgos Lanthimos adaptation of the Alistair Gray novel. Emma Stone is Bella. She is a recently deceased young woman brought back to life by a scientist who replaces her brain with that of her unborn child. Classic patter, right? It's not Eat, Pray, Love, but it is a globe-trotting whirlwind of self-discovery. There's lots of swearing, there's lots of humping, there's a good amount of fighting, and plenty, Ellie, of classic Lanthimos bands. Low-key, but also just very, very direct, like, you're a cunt kind of chatter.
There is like a real strong comedic streak to it, which you didn't necessarily see in things like The Favourite. Like, I don't know, I think that it's less that there's jokes and stuff like that, and more just that people like Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe just inhibit funny characters. Like, they're playing it dead straight, but it is kind of funny when you zoom out and just look at them.
This is a fun one where I hadn't read the book when I watched it, but I have read the book now. The book is actually very funny, but in a completely different way.
Really?
Like, Alasdair Gray's sense of humour is actually quite different, but they're both kind of quite good. It's a very good adaptation, I think. Like, it's like, because it is very different, but it kind of gets the right tone. I don't know, it's like kind of hard to describe how it works, but like, the whole kind of sense of like absurdity, like, features across both.
What is it that he eats when they finally get to Portugal? Is it like a custard tart or something like that?
They do.
But it's just like, I remember that one scene because like the film also just feels great. Like, everything looks amazing, and I don't know, like, you kind of want to be there, even though it is like this very surreal, almost quite like obscene vision of like, I don't know, like Victorian Europe.
Yeah, I must admit, this is one of the films where I have watched it again and it didn't play as well watching it at home. Like, I saw this at GFT. It was one of the like a preview. It was like a really kind of great screening, really funny. Like, yeah, it's like a really surprising film. Like I didn't know quite what to expect. You know, like hadn't also read the book before, but yeah, watching it the second time around, I did feel like, oh, it does lag a little bit, but it's still great. It's still a great film. I think it's great to be on the top 10. But yeah, for me, it's a film that didn't kind of like, yeah, it hasn't sort of hung around in my head.
Yeah, same. I think it was just so surprising when you watched it the first time, and then kind of returning to it, that surprise was gone, and for me then some of the impact was gone.
Yeah.
But it is obviously very cool.
Yeah.
It feels really original.
And Emma Stone is just so good on it. Like,
Yeah.
But then moving from a film that maybe hasn't hung around in your head to quite the extent you would expect, to a film that very much does hang around in your head. That's right, we're making on-the-fly thematic connections from these films. Number 6 is I Saw the TV Glow, which is the Jane Schonbrun film about two kind of teens in this US kind of suburban life who strike up a friendship over the Pink Opaque, which is a late night supernatural TV show about two women battling evil with a psychic connection to help them. Ellie, we talked about this on the podcast when it came out, and I think that there was definitely, I mean, I certainly felt that like it was a good film that I didn't like enjoy. Like, I did like it, but I didn't love it, but I did go away from it feeling slightly haunted by it.
Yeah, I think that this is like a really left field film, though. I think that it sort of like all of the films in the top 10 feel left field, but this sort of has like some real, I don't know, individualistic structure, and it's just really kind of dense and strange, and people take different things away from it. But I do think that there's like a great wealth of just fun stuff in there that like you don't often get to see directors doing. I think that Jane Schonbrun speaks power to a lot of things that get dismissed or overlooked, and that's kind of a big part of I Saw the TV Glow, is that these kids have this obsession with this TV show, and this is kind of what's like saving them through the sort of mundanity of small town American life, and it's about how like when you grow up you have this nostalgia, and it shows these things that I think people usually dismiss, like young adult fiction or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or whatever, and it suggests like, no, these are actually like really, really powerful forces that do kind of like massively shape people. And then nostalgia as well is powerful, but it can also be kind of untrustworthy. It can also have a darkness to it. So like there's a lot going on there other than it just being kind of well known as a strong trans allegory. But yeah, like, I don't know, it's just like, however you feel about it, it's more like complicated and more nuanced reflections from a trans director doing a kind of autobiographical story. I think that just incidentally, lots of interesting and new ideas are popping up that people kind of find themselves drawn to.
Yeah, it's one of these ones where you feel like, I feel very glad that it was made, and I'm very interested to see what Jane Schonbrun does next.
I believe it's also Martin Scorsese's favourite film of the year.
Really?
So, you know.
That's crazy.
You and Marty.
Yeah, we're like that. Now he's my granddad.
Yeah. Kino Grandpa strikes again.
It was also Rory Doherty's favourite film, so maybe we can hear from Rory.
Oh, are we hearing from Rory?
We are hearing from Rory.
Excellent, well set up.
Hello, it's Rory Doherty, writer for The Skinny. I Saw the TV Glow so much because it's one of these films that plays on the top of something really recognizable, a sort of sweet but forgotten friendship between unlikely people in high school, and is clearly suffused with some sort of magic and some sort of otherworldliness and connection and transcendence. But there is in the heart of this real sort of dread and sort of fatalism, which is central to the film's exploration of the need to make decisions and confront the things you're most scared about yourself and your identity, specifically with the film's treatment of transness. But it just means that it's so effective at sort of pulling you in and getting you lost in these suburban, nostalgic, hazy, electronic vibes, that basically in the last sort of 40 minutes, it really has you by the throat. And you do feel like you have been on a tremendous and immovable journey. But, just like so many of the characters, nothing about you on the outside has actually changed. And it's a huge, huge experience to watch.
Always good to hear from Rory, isn't it? Right.
We explained that this is what happening. Did I just not listen to that bit?
Yeah, I think that what Jamie did was he realised that I hadn't mentioned it before.
Okay, and
then
now dropped it.
has now set it up. But
So
we're now at the other side of it having happened.
Okay. Okay, so people know.
People will know because
People will know.
from context clues of Rory Doherty chiming in for a couple of minutes.
I haven't listened to the audio yet, so hopefully it wasn't some sort of racist rant. I presume it was, and Rory's a good lad. I presume he just reviewed. I presume he just reviewed the film. Hopefully, told us why he liked it. But we don't know. We'll have to find out.
So that was I Saw the TV. Oh man, we're into the top 5 already. What delights await us? Fucking hell. Also, the thing is, like, if you say he's a good lad, that's exactly what you say when someone has been racist. You want to cover for them.
He's one of the good ones.
We're going to have to cut so much of this out. Nah, who am I kidding? I'm not cutting any of this out. Right, number 5, Anora. The new one from Sean Baker, which I believe we talked about 2 episodes ago.
Yeah,
so we don't want to retread too much old
fresh.
ground. There is also definitely a thing on this list where, like, there's a lot of things on this list that we did like, but then I think the top 3 are... I think the podium places are a lot of our like absolute favourites of the year. So we're kind of, if it seems like we're rushing to get to the ones we actually want to talk about in slightly more depth, it's because we are. Anora, Jamie, the new one from Sean Baker. Mikey Madison's very good. The little dweeby Russian oligarch's son, he's very good.
He is.
And another film, which I gather from people who have seen it, I haven't, that it does kind of go off in a number of different directions.
Yes, it's a real rush of a film. I think why I liked it most is probably Sean Baker just really upended my expectations. Like if somebody says, you're about to watch a film about sex workers and like Russian oligarch gangsters, you've got a real kind of type of film in your mind, and this film kind of upends all that. The club atmosphere is like so wholesome. These women, the opening spends a lot of time showing you just how hard they work and how kind of like how they have each other's back, and there's a lot of like them just eating out of Tupperware because they're like between breaks. It's really nice. It's like really shows that these women work their ass off. And then when the gangsters come in, you think, there's going to be violence, but actually it turns into this kind of slapstick farce. So it's a film that's completely upending your expectations all the way through, right until the end, where it has the most sort of shocking ending, because essentially what you've watched is a comedy, which is a tragedy, and the ending sort of explains that. So yeah, Sean Baker, he does this all the time actually. I say I'm surprised. His films always kind of do this. If you think back to all the things he's made, Red Rocket, Tangerine, he takes these kind of quite tough subjects, but he kind of he creates films which are a joy to watch, which find the humour in these situations. And he's a kind of real kind of humanist in that way.
I would love to watch it again simply because as I was watching it, like you would laugh, and then there was a point where like you weren't laughing anymore, like it wasn't funny and it was just kind of sad. It was multiple times. This happened like 20 times throughout watching the film, and it's so subtle, it's so gradual, and the comedy comes so hand in hand with the tragedy that you don't even notice when it stopped being funny, like when your limit was. So I really want to watch this again and pay close attention to like what I find to be like the point where it gets too tiresome and the social commentary kicks in and it's too sad, it's not funny anymore. And good films reveal something about yourself.
Yeah, it's also just like a really good film about class. It's like essentially saying everyone in this film is at the behest of money, and like sort of all these kind of like transactions happening. And it's like it's like a really smart look at kind of class and labour and like how
it all revolves around one rich kid who has the option to just run the fuck out.
Yeah, but even that rich kid is doing it because if he doesn't, he loses his inheritance. So everybody's like sort of chasing the money. Which is like pretty sad, but it's a very kind of honest look at life. Like we're all kind of stuck in this system where we're doing all these things for money. We're making this podcast for no money, actually. So.
I'm only. So
we've escaped the system. This is what we do, guys.
I'm only doing this podcast because they agreed to pay me £100,000
I'm only doing it because a gangster is. How you're going to break my legs.
That Jamie Pettinger, he strikes a hard bargain. Jamie Pettinger has never threatened to beat up Jamie Dunn in order to make him do the podcast at Ground Floor. Today's the end of 2024 and libelous banter edition of the CineSkinny podcast. So that was Anora. Next up, number 4 is very high on the list. Actually, I was surprised to see a film that we literally didn't talk about when it came out this high up on the list. But maybe we just not got our finger on the pulse as much as we thought. Nah, it can't be that. It must be somebody else's fault. Anyway, this is Perfect Days from friend of the podcast, Vim Vendors. So Tokyo toilet cleaner Hirayama is a quiet man who revels in the simplicity of his organised solitude. And he kind of lives this life punctuated by ritual and being grateful for life. Maybe there just wasn't enough drama in this film for us to talk about. But Ellie, you put down in bold that you could talk about this briefly.
Just because I watched it really recently
there
on Mubi, which you can do too. But it's like you were saying at the beginning of Anora, Jamie, where it's like they have a really good way of making you kind of like foster a strong relationship with these people who are just like working to get by, just eating out their Tupperware or something like that. And that's kind of just this entire film, where it just shows this one guy with what some people would consider quite an unglamorous job, living in like a very sort of like modest home, but he seems completely content. And it's just it's kind of incredible how like it can show that when your entire work day is like down to the minute routine every single day, still there can be so much like variety in life, and you can have so many different experiences, and the people with you can change those experiences. Like when he plays music, it's a very different experience when he plays music with like his niece in the car and stuff like that, and he's allowed to explore this thing that's really routine to him but through new eyes. So it's really, really beautiful in that way. And I think that the complexity and the detail with which we were shown him doing his work like fosters a lot of dignity and respect. And I say that as someone who like had a job cleaning toilets at one point, and it was a really interesting thing like that this film made me feel. I only cleaned toilets as like a part-time job for a very short amount of time, but even back then when I was like 19, like I did find a strange sort of fulfillment in it. And it's like when that's kind of what your job is, and it's like there's nothing to do but just to help other people by like cleaning up, like it makes a lot of sense and it works really, really well. Which brings me briefly to the cleaning in this film. Oh man, it's not enough to say that this guy is a diligent employee. He's an artist. He is like absolutely going to town scrubbing that toilet. and the fact is, like, he folds the toilet paper into little triangles, and I'm like, I do not know how much they're paying that guy. Obviously not enough, but I think that they can't pay him enough. He's just such an absolute hero. I think that like that's probably why this is number 4, is that like so many people can see experiences that they've had and connect with him through that.
It just reminds you that you actually don't ever see work on film. You know, like everybody just seems to be rich and like they're not doing any work. I mean, unless you're like a lawyer or a cop, like what other kind of jobs do you ever see?
Or there's like in between bits of work, right? Where you're like turning up at the office, or you're talking to people, but you're not actually doing like enacting the labour.
Exactly. And like, there's a real kind of like, showing that actually just doing a job well, there's like real kind of dignity and pride in it, you know? And like even just like having a sandwich while the sun's on your face. It's a film that can remind you actually life's pretty cool. But the one thing I actually didn't like about this film, I mean, I love the film up until then. It's a film that, to me, the ending I really didn't like, because it seems to be saying throughout, actually, you know, living a life where you work hard and you have like hobbies, you like music, you like reading, like that's a great life. It seems to be saying that, and then at the end it doesn't, and that kind of really frustrated me.
I think for me there's this really subtle intonation that like, I mean, his like sister shows up and she's shocked at his lifestyle, and she like says, "Aren't you lonely?" And he kind of like witnesses people embracing and then goes and reflects by himself. So I think that there's that thing where like you do feel, oh, is this guy truly like wants for nothing, or is he like every other human being who actually does kind of want? And I think that's what I loved about this film, is that it's trying to show like even when you have a good life, it's still a full life of lots of different emotions. And even a very small, modest and humble life has this huge, like unimaginable spectrum of emotions that you experience. And that's sort of something that I definitely got in the end when he's just driving along like he does every day, but you can sort of see on his face how much he's experienced. So like really interesting.
Yeah, which is so like in keeping with Wim Wenders' other films, isn't it? Which are like I'm especially thinking of Wings of Desire, which is this huge like the idea of like heaven and angels and this enormous like scope to it, and then you just have like these everyday lives of people, and it's the everyday lives of people that are important, and Peter Falk is that. And it's just like so lovely. And I think he does that really well, of being like the human experience is like kind of finding beauty and finding like peace, but also like this tragedy, and it's the way that these things like intersect and sit alongside each other that is actually the peace of it in a way, which is a lesson that I refuse to learn, but apparently is true.
And Scotland has to up its toilet games. Its public toilets just...
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, fucking hell. Yeah.
Like, I just want to go to Tokyo, drink a lot of water and use all those bathrooms. I want to go peeing my way around down.
Yeah.
Hey, CineSkinny team, this is Josh Slater-Williams. My film of the year is Perfect Days by director Wim Wenders. A really life-affirming film about finding a beauty in a modest existence and in locating some kind of peace with the ephemeral nature of things, including happiness. Almost certainly his best narrative movie since at least the early 90s.
Okay, so that was Perfect Day, Wim Wenders. Right, now we're at the top three, the medal positions. The three, I think, should we all just agree now, the actual three best films of the year that we're about to talk about?
Yes.
Did you have something else? You're looking at me, Jimmy, like you had something else at your top
Are you saying we have to agree these are the best films? We
Yes.
got it right.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That's it. Well, why not? I don't know.
Excellent. We got three yeses and a why not. Never let it said that this podcast isn't well planned and we're all on the same page. So, number 3 on this list, Challengers. The most edge of your seat, adrenaline in your mouth film of the year, which revolved around a game of tennis between two washed up players and a failed polycule. Those aren't my words, they're the words of Anahit Behrooz that I took out of the magazine and then wrote on the planning document. Luca Guadagnino directs, Zendaya, Josh O'Connor and Mike Feist are the aforementioned polycule, pounding techno throughout from Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor. Jamie, shall we hear what Josh Slater-Williams has to say about Challengers?
Yes, I realised you forgot to mention that.
No, it's all right. I had always planned to mention it here, you see, because then we've explained a little bit, and then Josh is going to do more, and then we'll come back after. You see, like it's going to work out pretty well. You'll
This is really Brechtian, this podcast episode.
Apologies for this interruption, but we have some breaking news.
Hello, this is Jamie Dunn in the editing suite, i.e. my kitchen. As you can probably tell, we're getting a little bit mixed up in the studio. That was, of course, Josh Slater-Williams speaking about Perfect Days. And to speak on Challengers, we have the wonderful Emilie Roberts. So here is Emilie on her favourite film of the year, Challengers.
For me, Challengers was film of the year because it was the first time in a very long time that a film had me literally on the edge of my seat. It's just pure tension and excitement and madness and thrill for a film about tennis, which is mental. And yeah, just the second that Ross and Reznor score kicked in, I was in it. We were so back, baby. And I wasn't out of it for the entire runtime. I think about these characters all the time. I just think it was incredible. I saw it twice. I'll see it a third time. It's amazing.
So as I was saying, so see, Josh has like filled in some of the gaps there, and we can continue the conversation from here.
Yes.
See, that's the power of editing. Anahit, what did you think of Challengers? You thought it was quite good, didn't you?
Because I loved it.
How do you feel about the fact that possibly one of your favourite films of the year is actually a proper sports movie, like The Mighty Ducks or Rocky?
Just like them. Yeah, isn't that crazy? I don't think of this as a sports movie though. Like, I know it technically is. I think of this as a sexy movie. Like, that is the sport that it is negotiating, is how do people like keep fucking each other and also fucking each other over, which is hard. That's a skill that you have to learn. I fucking love this film. This is my film of the year. Even though I think there are the next two films that we're going to talk about, I think maybe are technically better. Maybe I also think they're better, I don't know, but there is nothing like that first time that I saw Challengers. Within the first couple of minutes where like it starts zooming in on like the sweat dripping off their faces and then that techno score, and I just felt myself like vibrate in my seat. Like I stood up. Like I paid attention, I locked in, and I haven't felt that way about a film in such a long time, where it's just like addictive, like you're having a chemical reaction to that film, which is so amazing. It's just so different as well from what he's done for quite a while. Like he's really done a lot of quite soft, sweet films, like Bones and All, Call Me By Your Name. What's the other one that he did?
Suspiria.
Suspiria, yeah. I
Very
haven't
sweet.
actually seen Suspiria, which is not soft and sweet, I guess. But it also isn't like this, from what I understand, that there's a kind of real brashness to this, like a real Americanness, which is like really interesting. And it just felt exciting, actually, to see a director that you really love, and you love almost for that familiarity. Like, I went into Bones and All, and it was different, it was original than Call Me By Your Name, but there was like a thread that was running between them. And then to be like, oh, you are the same person, you have the same obsessions about like desire and how that functions, but you were just doing something completely fucking different, and you don't give a fuck. You will put the camera in a tennis ball and whack that thing around the tennis court, and you don't care. And it felt exciting. Like, I don't think I've been excited by a film in so long.
I get what you mean about this not being a sports film, because I also don't really think it's a sports film. No disrespect to people who like play tennis, but I don't really care about tennis. It just doesn't really interest me.
No.
So this film doesn't make tennis look like tennis. It makes tennis look cool.
Yes.
Like, it's not... We don't have wide shots where you get to see both of them on either side of the court and you can actually see what it is about them that's meaning this person's winning the match. You don't actually get the strategy of the game told to you. You get shots of balls hitting rackets and sweat dropping off of people's asses. Like, that's the best part of anything. So it's only that. It would just be like, it's what I want from like an ice hockey film where there's absolutely no ice hockey and it's just a bunch of guys wailing on each other with sticks. Like, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. Really fundamentally understands the like inherent homoeroticism of any sport ever.
I think you're describing all sports movies. Like, no sports movies, like, because the thing is, sports quite boring usually, like, because it takes hours to do. Like, you watch like football, you might get 2 goals, you know, like if you watch like any film about football, there's like goals every second, you know. It's like,
but this one is like just about sex. Do you know what I mean? If the other sports films are like, about like relationships and about like tension and like ideas of success and class and like all of this stuff, which is very interesting. But this is just like the sport is sex. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah,
and I love that.
I'll watch Field of Dreams when it's as horny as this.
I think one of the things about, because I only watched it for the first time a wee while ago, and I was surprised at how, because the reason I said sport is because it's about tennis, but also because of like how closely in certain, like, it really matches that visual style in a lot of cases of those like either sports films or like broadcast sport. It has so much like product placement and branding, and it has all these kind of like visual cues that you expect. And I think that's partly what makes it so successful, is because every time you might think it's going to go too far, it's like, it reminded me a lot of like some of Paul Verhoeven's films, where like it's kind of simultaneously doing the best example of a type of film and it's a satire of that type of film. So it's like every time it goes slightly, like, it starts to really go down the kind of sexy route, it pulls it back into like a sporty route, and then every time you start being like, we've been spending too long on this tennis, it'll take you back to the other stuff. And yeah, it does it just like fucks off all the conventions of like the order you tell this kind of story and the people who you focus on in this kind of story, but it does it all packaged like visually in a very similar way to your classic like sports movie.
I mean, part of why it's so fun is the ridiculous structure, and it's like, but like it is like knocking you around like a tennis ball, like like as the audience. But yeah, as well as being like the most purely fun film of the year, I think it is also the kind of the one with the biggest kind of cultural footprint. Like, I feel like in terms of memes, in terms of like Twitter and Instagram, this is the one that really captured people's imaginations. I feel like it's a film that was in the cinema, but it didn't really leave all year, because it was like people were memeing it and like referencing. You know, I've seen that sauna scene so many times. Like, just people keep reposting this stuff. You know, like or the scenes of the lads kissing. Maybe I'm following the wrong Twitter.
I mean, well, it made like threesomes look really, really cool, and I was like, I kind of thought threesomes were already cool, but I guess they're way cooler than I thought.
And I love as well, that it has this really like chaotic energy and this really anarchic structure, but then when it ends, you're like, oh, it did what it just promised at the very beginning. Just like her being like, I just want to watch some good fucking tennis. That's all the film was about the whole time. It's such a simple premise, but it goes down it makes it complex, and then you come to the end and you're like, oh, that's what it was.
This is one thing this is maybe my issue with the film, like this thing that's maybe stopped me saying this is a masterpiece, is like, Tashi, I don't understand. Is it Tashi? I don't understand what Zendaya's character wants. Like,
She wants to watch some good fucking tennis.
does she? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
She would even have a baby with this guy so that he would be a more competitive tennis player with his rival.
She wants to watch some good fucking, tennis.
Anyway, I just thought her character was a little bit too mysterious or something. Like, I felt like all the acting's great. Like, I love all the characters, and I really know exactly what the lads want. But she was like a mystery to me. I don't know.
I love that about it.
We could talk about challenges all day, but we've got so much more to talk about. So we'll go from probably the most fun, vibrant, I Feel the Rush, Addicted to Your Touch, etc., film of the year, onto probably the most serious film of the year, but also one that it follows kind of similar, like it's also very like technically and formally daring, shall we say. So Zone of Interest, Jonathan Glazer, is number 2 on the list. Christian Friedel plays the Auschwitz Commandant Rudolf Höss. Sandra Hüller plays his wife Hedwig. The film follows their kind of quotidian life in their big house next door to the concentration camp. As everybody says, Jamie, this film is 2 films. Do we have thoughts from somebody else to go to just now, or do we not?
We do. We have Tony Ingles is going to talk.
Okay, so maybe...
sorry. Well, we do have thoughts from potentially someone for challenges, but they didn't actually get back to me, so we don't know if we're going to have that.
Well, that will have happened by this point already.
But we will have thoughts from Tony Ingles on the Zone.
This is Tony Ingles on the Zone of Interest.
All right, Tony Ingles, skinny contributor here. I've never wanted to get out the cinema quicker than when I first watched The Zone of Interest, and that's probably the biggest compliment I can pay it. It filled me with a kind of dread I can only compare to watching the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It made my skin crawl, it terrified me, it remains urgent and relevant. I'm in awe of its honesty and bravery, to be honest. It's maybe the defining work of art of the 2020s. Also, Mika Levy deserves a jail for that score.
An interesting start to the conversation from Tony Ingles. Good lad. Good work. So yeah, as everybody says, Jamie, this is 2 films operating kind of simultaneously. I think that this is one of those films where, like, it obviously is talking about a very dark period in history, but it is also very clearly talking about a dark period called the present, the year of our Lord 2024. And I think one of the things that's so successful about The Zone of Interest is the way that it talks about a very specific dark bad time, but it talks to it in a way where it's not just about that.
Well, the problem is there's been so many Holocaust films that it's become such a kind of cliche of cinema, and Glazer just finds an amazing way to talk about it by not depicting it. You know, like he decides instead. Well, first of all, he does something that I think is really the chilling thing. He doesn't depict Nazis as monsters. Like, this is what we, films about Nazis, they have to be kind of raving lunatics, and I think that's sort of a balm to help us understand why the Holocaust happened. But actually, if he says essentially these are just like boring everyday people who have managed to compartmentalize the horrors that are happening, and in this case happening next door. This is a family who live in this lovely bucolic life. This is the 2 films we're talking about. One film is a family who's living in the countryside. They're having swims. They're walking around their garden. They're having parties. It's all very lovely. But across the way, we're hearing the horrors of Auschwitz. So that is the genius of the film. It sort of lets us see that the people who committed the Holocaust were essentially just sort of bureaucrats. Not any different from anybody else. So just people who could somehow turn a blind eye, and that's what makes it more chilling. And obviously that's what makes the film universal, because we can look at all sorts of atrocities throughout the world, many happening now, where people are just turning a blind eye. They refuse to see what's happening. They sort of look at their own self-interests and they can turn away. And that's what I think is the chilling thing about the film. It's people can live like this. You can like go home from doing this job, tuck your kids in at night, but you can hear through the walls screaming. You can walk around the garden and smell the flowers, but actually what you're smelling is death, because it's all around you. So that is what makes the film so chilling. And then you add on that it's made by Jonathan Glazer, who's this kind of technical master, and he's put it together with a really interesting way. If you actually look into how the film was made, it's so interesting. He's using like hidden cameras. I don't like, nobody really knows when they're on, and that's why I think the performances are so kind of like convincing and compelling as well. So yeah, amazing film.
And I know that they shot the film, like the visuals first, and then went away and did all the sound afterwards. So the actors didn't they were just like kind of going around doing what they were doing in these scenes, and then they went away and kind of created the soundscape separately.
Yeah, and then the way they create the soundscape is so interesting as well. I think you were saying, Annie, that they went and they recorded, or was it somebody else was telling me they would do field recordings of like riots and protests and people, because they didn't want to just send actors into like sound booths and say pretend you're a Holocaust victim. What they did is they went to real sort of situations where people were being beat by police or kind of like shot with like water cannons, and sort of like recorded that. And that's, I think, why those sounds are so haunting, because that's real people sort of like going through not the same situation but similar sort of like your situation. So yeah, again, just technically on a technical level, it's like a masterpiece,
Yeah, it's a really incredible bit of filmmaking.
Yeah, there's this, like, I sort of went in with, I don't know, just like a genuine anxiety before I even started watching the film, because I knew what to expect from Under the Skin, where like Jonathan Glazer uses horrific imagery in a really, really interesting way, but that imagery, like you say, never comes. And that kind of, I've not seen the film since then, and I sat through it the entire time just watching these people kind of compartmentalize everything, and like you see, you never get the satisfaction of a judgment from the director. The director never points and says, "Look at these monsters, look at them doing something monstrous." It's always withheld from you, but you're expecting it the whole time, or at least I was. And now, like, the thought of going back and rewatching the film, I still feel that kind of anxiety of like something like really horrific is going to be revealed to me, but it's not. And the fact that it's not is why I'm still sort of feeling that. Like, I don't know the extent to which this is really a spoiler, but the closest that it ever actually gets to, I don't know, trying to depict something visually that reflects the kind of horrific acts going on is when the commandant, at one point when he's alone, starts gagging, and that's just it. He just has a very sudden like collapse and like almost throws up, but nothing actually comes from it, and he just moves on, and it's like kind of like a, I don't know, like to me it's a kind of definitive image of the film is like that you do know what's going on, and you have this like real horrific anticipation of it, but it will never really reveal it to you, and it'll always just happen on a background level in that sound design.
Yeah.
I think as well, it's this idea of like turning a blind eye and this idea of indifference, but it is also this idea of like that being a kind of agency and action, right? Like, these aren't even just like regular people that are living close by to it. They are the people that are running the camp. And I think it does a really good job of showing that. I think sometimes when we talk about this stuff, we talk about it, especially like the narrative around the Holocaust, of like, oh, everyone just like let it happen, like ordinary people living in Germany. And I think that is part of it. But I think it is also that they actively allowed it to happen, and they often were actively aiding it to happen through their like everyday actions, whether that is work, whether that is through their politics. Like, all of those like everyday things make up like violence, essentially. And it does a really good job of actually connecting that idea of cause and effect in a way that we can often abstract these things of, oh my god, so many people living in Germany and they just let it happen, but this kind of almost taking agency, like political agency, away from people, like, well, but they were far away from it, blah, blah. And it's like, no, these people knew what was happening. That people, when horrible things happen in the world, we know they are happening, and the actions that we are doing actively allow them to happen in very direct ways. And I think that's actually a really quite unusual political message for a film to have. I think often we like to be, or filmmakers like to be, a little bit more like held back maybe. And I really respected that about it. And then the other thing that really stayed with me is, you're saying that like the kind of horrible visuals never come, but then there are, similar to Under the Skin, really unsettling visuals. There was something about the like that almost X-ray but like black and white.
This is almost
infrared.
almost like dreamlike.
Yeah. That it's just fucked up. I don't know why it's so fucked up, but it's like seeing someone like in the negative, and you don't know what they're doing, and the sense that maybe like someone's spying on them. There's always the sense of like being seen, actually, that was really horrifying. And then when the screen goes to red, and so he has these things that are like vestiges of horror filmmaking in like the method, but then actually what you're seeing, you're right, is actually nothing. And that was also really fucking clever, because I think of it as a film that made me, in quite a body horror way, feel very squeamish. Yeah. But it isn't that you actually ever see, although I guess you see like, is at the end with like the piles of shoes and stuff. Yeah. But even that, I suppose, isn't like a quote-unquote body, but it is.
Yeah, you're right. I suppose that is really interesting, that it ends with like seeing the Auschwitz memorial like as we see it today, like as you would go and visit it, and you see it like, again, to go back to cleaning, but you see like people clocking in and like tidying it up and getting it ready for visitors, and it's like that's a really, really interesting use of imagery that kind of also does, I don't know, just show how successfully that horror was compartmentalized, that it's kind of become this thing that we have to just keep as a sort of symbol.
But I guess it's saying you can't actually do that either, because like I say, it's this kind of bucolic, beautiful life, but then the horror also comes in because like he'll find like a jawbone in the river when he's swimming with his kids, and he'll panic and drag them out. Or like I say, his mother-in-law visits.
Yes.
And she's clearly disgusted, and you don't quite know why. And it turns out because the smell, she's just like new to this place. She's like, my God, I can't live here. It's like disgusting. So like, that kind of the horror is there, but it sort of takes a while to seep through, and you realise actually this whole film is like contaminated somehow. Like there's a kind of sense of like, it's almost like, I always thought those at night time was like radiation. It's almost like this place is like contaminated, like because of the evil, because of the murder that's happening here. So.
So the top 10, Love Lies Bleeding at 10, Kneecap number 9, All of Us Strangers number 8, Poor Things at 7, number 6 was I Saw the TV Glow, number 5 Anora, 4 Perfect Days, the top 3 Challengers, Zone of Interest, and then our film of the year, Lackey Mirror, Alice Rohrwacher. Josh O'Connor's back, his second visit to the top 3. The Josh O'Connor Man of the Year, I think we're going to have to say. So he plays Arthur, troubled English archaeologist bumbling around with a crew of Etruscan grave robbers. It's Josh, Carol Duarte, Vincenzo Nemolato, Isabella Rossellini's in it very briefly. It's very, very good. Jamie, do we have somebody to say additional things about why it's good?
We do. It was Carmen Paddock's number 1, and she's speaking on it.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Carmen Paddock, a film critic for The Skinny. My film of the year is La Chimera, directed by Ellie Robertson. It's just this lovely, romantic, funny, sad film about a really grumpy and unhappy grave robber who's played by Josh O'Connor, so he's also very charming despite his best intentions. And it's just beautifully made, beautifully shot, changes aspect ratio and speed, and it's just about the people and the things that we love and lose over thousands of years.
Lovely stuff, thank you, Carmen. Right, so film of the year. Where did everybody have it on their list? Briefly.
Oh, I can't remember. I didn't know I was going to have to.
I think I had it in number 4.
I had it in number 1.
I wish I had put it higher maybe, but then I also really stand by 1, 2 and 3. So
Well, fair enough. Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of the top 4 is like basically all number 1.
I had number 4.
Okay. That makes me feel better.
I wish I'd written down my list somewhere.
I can tell you.
Oh.
But I think one of the things about it is that it is a film that it actually kind of marries...
7.
Number 7, okay.
I think it marries together a lot of things that other films on this list also... What are you looking at, Anahit?
Sorry, it's like fully just come up.
Oh.
Oh no.
Anahit's mic stand.
Can I just like
has come
take it
the
off
table.
the fucking thing?
A few moments later.
Right. So yeah, I think that La Chimera combines together a bunch of things that other films on this list also have. So it's got a bit of like magic realism, it's got a bit of sad Josh O'Connor looking a bit grimy, it's got interesting like thematic stuff going on, and it's a period film as well. It's doing a bunch of different things, Jamie Dunn.
It is.
All at once.
Yeah, this is a good one because I got to see it again. I watched it on a screener for the show, and then luckily it became the CineSkinny Film Club film months. Weirdly, it was like actually the most successful. This show is probably the film of the year because it was the most successful CineSkinny Film Club in terms of like selling out, and that was like months after it had been at the cinema. So I presume a lot of people were coming back to see it again because that's that kind of film. It really lingers with you, and I think watching it again really like solidified it for me as a great film. I guess when the first time I watched it, I was struck by how it looks. Like I think Rohrwacher, she's just so playful as a filmmaker. You know, it's like got full of these kind of little, like it speeds up at moments. It's like it goes to like 60mm with these kind of rough edges. There's a moment where like a couple of moments. It's when Josh O'Connor's character Arthur, when he finds the treasure, the camera will do like a 180 spin, like on its axis. It's just full of these kind of like really interesting visual like trickery, pokery, which I really loved. And it's got this kind of carnivalesque quality as well, like where he's got this gang of like followers, and it's very Fellini-like. So like I loved all that initially, and then the second time watching it, I was really caught up, I think, just in the like Arthur's story. Like I felt like a real kind of emotional connection the second time. Like it has like a lot of layers, you can appreciate it, and it's kind of visual beauty and poetry. But then actually it's following a guy who is, it's a real kind of beautiful love story. And then what it says about like our relationship to kind of like treasures and antiquity is also really interesting. This character, that's kind of, to me, is watching it again was the kind of main theme. It's like this guy who loves these treasures but is using it for like ill-begotten gains. He's essentially plundering these graves to make money. And it's the question, like he's haunted by that idea that he's like robbing these like beautiful objects. And there's like that, I think you talked about, Anahit, when we talked about it the first time, that amazing scene where they crack open the shrine at the very end. And it's this idea that these things are perfectly preserved in the ground, these kind of treasures, but once you kind of like gaze upon them, they're just not as precious anymore. Just like by opening that grave,
like the air
comes in,
and
it destroys it slightly. So that's like all really potent, and like watching it again, it kind of like really, the whole film is just like has such great atmosphere. Like I love like how everything's crumbling. The houses they're in have like, the walls are falling apart. There's like grass growing through the pavements. It's just a film that's just a delight to spend time within it, but it's just really rich with like ideas as well.
I think we talked about this when we did the episode, that for me it's like Orpheus and Eurydice story. So it's like interested a lot in kind of boundaries between life and death, but just boundaries between like different states, really, between like the past and the present. I think I haven't seen any of her other films, I don't think, but people talk about it as like part of like this kind of cohesive like exploration that she's doing of like Italy's past, the relationship that we have with Italy's past, which obviously is such a like quote unquote famous history, right? Like that idea of like the Roman period, all of this stuff like has been brought so very much into the present, and she's really interested in the boundary between like past and present when that's so thin. And for me, that this is something about like someone trying to go back into both a historical past but into their own emotional past. They're trying to retrieve something, which is really all that grief ever is that you're trying to like go back and get the thing that you lost. And I just thought it was so beautifully done, like that kind of the red thread that he keeps following that's from her dress, the way that like weaves magical realism like in and out, but in a way that actually never feels, it doesn't feel that you're seeing anything actually magical. It just feels that the whole world is actually infused with magic if you were to see it. I just think it's so, oh man, it was so beautiful. He's so great. He's so great.
Yeah, how does Italy get like peeling wallpaper to look so good? Because like I feel like, I don't know, you're right, everything is sort of like ruined and crumbling, and that does really speak to the film's ideas about our relationship with the past, but also it is at the same time like even this dilapidated present is like still very beautiful. And like obviously like Josh O'Connor is like cutting about in his little tan suit, and he's very beautiful, and he has like even though he's meant to be playing quite like a sort of like broken and reclusive character, there's still like a real life to him. Which I just feel like, it just wouldn't work anywhere other than where it is set, which is Italy. Not only because you're right, it does have like this long history, and it does have literal like treasures underneath, but like, I think if this was set in Britain, like our stuff isn't sun damaged, it's just like blighted by storms, and it's just like much less like
it's all damp.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like overgrown and stuff like that. So you couldn't get that with I don't know, setting it in like, I don't know, like Wester Hales or something like that, just graffiti on all the walls.
Jamie, you got anything more to add? I came to you first, so
I mean, nothing other than I'm very happy that it's number one. I think it's a great choice by, well done, the staff for choosing it, because like they chose well.
And like you say, the fact that it was probably the most popular and most successful of those film club screenings means we're completely vindicated on two different fronts. So lovely stuff. You love to see it. So that was our top 10 of the year. Like I say, we've discussed most of these on other episodes of the podcast, so you can go back and listen to those if you want to hear more of what we thought about them back then. So that is our top 10 of the year. You can read more about them in the new issue of The Skinny, which is out now. But thank you, Jamie.
Cheers, Pierre.
Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anahit.
Thank you.
We'll be back fairly shortly with more of a fun little bits and pieces roundup of some of our favourite little bits of the rest of 2024. But for now, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.